Today I'm going to speak on Indian spirituality, and we'll follow a format as in I'm going to speak, but do note down your questions because we're going to have an extended session of question and answer. I would like it to be a discussion rather than I coming here as someone because I'm sitting a little higher than you doesn't mean I'm anyway higher than you. So it's just that I've been given this privilege again by Aurobindo, by Devasmitadi. So I thank you all for coming here, and we'll make it a discussion. We'll use this free format. And this topic that we're going to do is the third of the topics I'm doing on the foundations of Indian culture. This is a book that Sri Aurobindo wrote, not under that title, but it was a series of essays that he published in the Arya from 1918 to 1920, so 100 years back. And he talked about the Renaissance in India, that he wished that there would be a Renaissance in India. And we are still hoping that there will be. And perhaps in various ways, this Renaissance has started, that so many of us, so many in India and in the world are participating in this Renaissance. So the knowledge that India has cultivated or excavated from her past is not just limited to this nation of India. It's a gift for the world. And this was Sri Aurobindo's vision also. So in this book, The Foundations of Indian Culture, he's talked about various aspects of culture, but we see that he's always coming back to Indian spirituality as the foundation of the foundations of Indian culture. So he says that everything in India stems from her spiritual treasures. And everything in the sense, very mundane things like politics, even the Indian politics has its source, spirituality has its source. And of course, Indian art, you can see it's a little more elevated in status than politics. Commerce, even there was the foundation or the underlying thoughts and ideas were spirituality. So in this talk, we'll try to see how that is possible, how India made it happen. And we'll take it from there. And of course, there'll be questions as all of us are living in the current world, and there may be disparities in what we see in current politics. And if we compare current politics, current economics, current world affairs with what India had thought in the ancient past, we may see a huge gap. That if that was the ideal, how far we are from practicing that ideal. So that too will come up, and this is something we want to engage with. Because if we want to start a Renaissance in India, we have to engage with why it is different and what we can do to bridge the gap. And Sri Aurobindo's life history, a little bit of it. For 21 years of his life, he had no idea of Indian culture, leave alone spirituality. In fact, he didn't know if God existed. He calls himself an agnostic because he was not given that kind of education. He was sent to England to get a very Western world view, because the idea that his father had for him, nowadays we think children should be engineers or doctors or something where they can earn a lot of money. So 120 years back, the idea was ICS. That was the choicest of professions, Indian Civil Service, which is now called Indian Administrative Service. So his father had planned such a life or such a career for Sri Aurobindo, and sent him and his two brothers to England to study. And they all three returned to India, and none of them became ICS officers. And Sri Aurobindo, on the contrary, said, I will not work for this government that is oppressing my people. So he worked for a Maharaja, a very progressive Maharaja at that time in Baroda, and he started absorbing Indian culture. So till age of 21, he didn't know his mother tongue, that is Bengali. And when he landed in Baroda, within a year, he was learning Gujarati, Bengali, Sanskrit, Hindi, and he just kept absorbing Indian culture, spirituality, and then he started translating also. He went to the depths of the Sanskrit works, and he started translating. And at that time, it was a revolutionary work because the translators were all either from Germany or from England. They were getting sponsorship from England, and they were sort of part of this Orientalist project or the colonizers' project of taking on the white man's burden. So their view of India was a depressed society without much wealth, either in intellect or in life, in vitality, in life processes. Indian art is not worth looking at. Indian literature is very paltry. Everything was very mediocre, paltry, not worth looking at. So we have to educate the Indians and teach them Western education. So what Sri Aurobindo did is removed these biases and looked under the covers. And he said, to the contrary, India has a lot of wealth in all the fields that you haven't understood. It's because you haven't understood, you have seen it from the Western lens. So now see it from the Indian lens. And he started working on translating the original texts of India, the foundational texts of Indian spirituality, and that is the Veda. So he translated the Vedas. He saw this, it uses symbolic language, which is why it is so difficult to penetrate into the idea of the Vedas. So he did that, and then he moved on to the next layer. So now notice, I'll tell you about the different layers of spirituality that existed in India. So the first layer were the 4 pillars that held up this big grand structure of Indian spirituality are the 4 Vedas. Of them, the Rig Veda is the foundational text, and the other 3 Vedas share a lot of ideas and shlokas or hymns from the Rig Veda. It's the massive book, the most massive of all the Vedas, with a lot of symbolism, a lot of contributors, including women contributors. So there was a culture of women rishikas and men rishis. They all contributed. This is the foundation. From the Vedas grew the Vedanta. That means the anta means the end or the interior. It has 2 meanings, the same word. So either they're talking of the end of the Vedas, that means they are following up on the Veda, or we can also interpret the Vedanta as talking of the inner side of the Veda. Both are fine. They are not contradictory ideas. They are ideas that harmoniously sit together. So the whole layer of the Vedanta, now you have many texts. So these are basically 3 big texts. One is the Upanishads. There are a lot of Upanishads, some 108 that we know of, but we have heard other Upanishads being mentioned that we have no source or trace of. We have lost them. Of those 108, about 13 are very well commented on. They've become sort of the major Upanishads because people have commented. It's not that the other Upanishads don't have new ideas or special hymns. They too have. So that's the Upanishads. And then you have the Bhagavad Gita. That's Krishna and Arjuna, that the colloquy or the conversation that Krishna has with Arjuna, where he establishes what dharma is and then deconstructs what dharma is and takes Arjuna from human to his divine state, all the way in one book. So it's a phenomenal book, the Bhagavad Gita. Second of the Vedantas, and the third is sutras called Brahma Sutra. So the Brahma Sutras are the least studied in their origin, but Shankaracharya, one of the most prolific of Indian philosophers, has commented extensively on the Brahma Sutra. So people go back to Shankaracharya's commentary on the Brahma Sutras, and those are very well studied because there is a whole school of thought that Shankaracharya set up. And that parampara that he set up 1,500 years back is still running very strongly. And they study the comments on the Brahma Sutra. So that's the second layer of Indian spirituality. So I still say Indian because there was no external influence at that time. It was just the continent that was just exchanging ideas with each other, everything below the Himalayas and bounded by the 3 oceans or 3 seas. And then we start getting a little bit of mixture from the trade route, the Silk Road, and we get Western ideas, we get people from Northern Africa who have come to India, from Central Asia. Then we start getting a lot of different kinds of ideas. And from these ideas, something foundational that was the way of life becomes mainstream, and that is storytelling. It's a very human occupation to tell stories. So the Vedas are hymns and abstract, not so abstract, symbolic. The Vedanta is very abstract, difficult to understand. Only people who have reached very high levels of the intellect can access these books. And then suddenly we have these stories, the profusion of stories that come up, and that's the layer of Puranas. Purana means ancient. So they start telling stories. So all these energies that were energy of the illumined mind gets a name, Indra. And he gets not just a name, he gets his whole family. Indra has a Shakti, okay, that's Sachi Devi. He has his events that he goes through his life. He conquers this, he conquers these demons. So everything becomes a story. So around Indra, there's a whole story that goes around Indra. So that's the Purana of Indra. And then there are other gods like Vishnu. So there's a Vishnu Purana that tells stories of Vishnu. There's this Purana and that Purana. And then it goes on, and the Puranas there are 18 Maha Puranas and 18 smaller Puranas. But this too is a gamut of work with a lot of contributors. So again, we don't know if some contributors have been left out, some stories have been left out. So alongside the Puranas, a different sort of storytelling started, and that is, we call it Itihasa, which means history, but who knows? These are the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Humongous texts. So the Ramayana itself is several times the size of the Iliad, and Mahabharata is several times the size of the Ramayana. So we have these texts, and the Indians believe, it's a belief, that they tell about Indian history, the history of the people of India. So it started with this Rama and his kingdom and his people, and we are descendants of Rama. And then the Mahabharata, that's after the Ramayana, there was these two big families, the Kuru family actually, one family and lots of smaller kingdoms that fought together at one point. And all these wars were part of the Indian history. So that's the belief, but it was again, through the main stream of the storyline, there are a lot of additions. And while you're listening to these stories, you're also learning something called dharma. So dharma shastras creep in through the stories. And dharma shastra means they tell you what's good, what you're supposed to do, what's your duty, what's your life about. Does life have a meaning? Do you have one life? Do you have multiple lives? How is a king supposed to behave with the subjects? How is a subject supposed to behave with the king? How is a man supposed to behave with his wife? And wife with the children? So all these relationships are talked about, and good advice is given. And all this advice together, we call it's like the Dharma Shastra. So now you have these, we came to the third layer of the storytelling layer. And then we have a layer of the philosophies. So based on these two, on the Dharma layer and the spiritual layer of the Vedanta, there was a profusion of philosophers who looked at this huge work that was there about God, about life, about relationships, about everything possible. And they said, let's focus on a little bit of it, and my theory will revolve around it. It's just like when you read a text, something resonates more with you, and something resonates more with someone else because of what they are made of. So it depends on your propensity. So some people resonated more with the God that doesn't have a shape or form, and is abstract, is up there. So they followed a path, and they followed that philosophy. There were several philosophers who developed that idea of the abstract God. And then there were others who couldn't relate very well with a God that doesn't have a shape and form. So they followed the concrete God. And they said, okay, this God, these are the qualities he has. I'm going to follow this. And from these qualities, I like this particular quality a lot more than the rest of the qualities, so I'll follow this. So it all depends on what comes naturally to you. And you follow that path. Because to go against the grain of your nature is like wasting time. Like nature also follows. No? If you drop if you want to create a stream and there is just flat surface, you see where the water is going to go. It's going to take the path of least resistance. There'll be least friction. Maybe it'll find a little bit of a slope downwards. So that's the water's path. Similarly, our path follows the same as this natural path of water. So some people resonate very well with the heart, reaching the divine through the heart. So they chose the bhakti path, that through devotion for the Lord, and that Lord will be as concrete as a human lover. So they imagine this Lord as though they can, touch, feel, and dance with the Lord. So they're all part of this movement of the heart. Then there were some others who dealt better with the mind, with abstractions of the mind, with engagement with mind, with philosophies, discussions. So they followed jnana yoga, the path of knowledge. Then there are people who work best with their hands, with their bodies. So it is their path. So several paths came up. So after the layer of stories, Puranas and Itihasas, a layer of darshanas, which is the word for philosophy, and philosophy doesn't stand alone. There's always a yoga component. Yoga means the practice. So the philosophy and practice, or the doxa and the praxis, always go together. So alongside the philosophy, there was also a practice that came. And every practice means an yoga. Yoga means the union, and it's a practical way of reaching the divine. So these two layers came about. And we almost come to the current age. We have this movement of the heart that started in around the 1400s, 1200s, with Jayadev, all these poets who started talking about Radha, the love of Radha for Krishna. So movement of the heart started. And at around that point, what happens is, around 1200, India gets her first external influence. And that is from the Islamic conquerors. So they come from Turkey, from Persia, and Afghanistan, Arabia. So the Persian culture was already very strong. It's also a very ancient culture. It was the Zoroastrian culture, and then when Islam came around 632 CE, they also started getting two cultures, the Zoroastrian and the Islamic culture. And they've both come to India. And the Islamic culture came in a very strong way. And what blended very well with the Bhakti movement is the Sufi movement. So right from the start of Islam, there was this mystical wing of Islam called the Sufi. So that's the mystical in the sense they approach God through love. So Allah has lots of names, lots of qualities. Of them, there are qualities of beauty, kindness, what we can call the feminine qualities. Nothing to do with gender, but there are soft feminine qualities which Allah has, and there are masculine qualities like bravery, standing up for oneself. So the Sufi movement took on the feminine qualities, just like the Bhakti movement. So when they came to India, the two movements very well started fusing, and the Sufi masters and the Bhakts, or the saints of India, they created a resonance of a grand movement of heart. So the Bhakti movement took us on for a long time. And even now, there's a huge movement, and we have come to the modern world with so many different kinds of Indian spiritualities that coexist and harmoniously coexist because the foundational works are still the same. It's the Vedas and the Vedanta. So they all branched out from it. Sufism came, it blended in very well. So sort of Hindus went to Sufi dargahs, and Sufis came to temples. They sang of Krishna. So it's been there. There was no disconnect anywhere. And this is the culture that we have inherited. So when I say now Indian culture, it really doesn't have, or Indian spirituality, it doesn't have any religious connotation to it. I'm saying it all the more because now religion has divided people a lot, and spirituality wants to unite people. So by taking the example of how well Sufism blended in the spiritual climate of India, I just want to say that it's nothing to do with religion, because Sufism is from Islam, and the Bhakti movement is from the Vedanta foundational texts. And they blended very well. So as soon as you fall into this realm of spirituality, and you see unity, there is no question of division anymore, and there is no like you are this, I am that, us and them. That kind of divide goes away. So now that we are going to look at Indian spirituality, and we also know that Sri Aurobindo has kept it as the foundational idea of India. So even when Indians expressed art, they did it because they have spirituality in them, which means that they first meditated on what to draw, and whatever that meditation yielded was put on canvas. So that's how the temples of the murals of Ajanta and Ellora, you can see, has these figures, sometimes even secular figures like kings and the courtiers, dancing women, but they all have a very meditative aspect to them, as though they are all meditating while they are dancing, they're meditating. And the reason is everyone through their walk of life is trying to connect with the divine. So each one of us is practicing our own yoga. In whatever field we have chosen, we are trying to connect to the divine, and that comes across in the painting, in classical painting of India, classical music that we know, Hindustani classical music, Carnatic classical music. Most of the songs are, if it is vocal, then it's to the divine. The words are also trying to connect to the divine. And if it is not vocal, they evoke a meditative mood. So they are playing with all these moods, all the rasas, no? The Nava rasas that are codified in the foundational text. The rasas are also virya. Virya means bravery, and then love, shringara, love for another human. So you have these very human rasas. But there is of the 8 rasas, there is a 9th rasa that is the foundational rasa. And that rasa is Shanta rasa, is the rasa of peace. So even while life is going on, and even war is going on, and so many aspects of life are going on, but at the foundation of it is this rasa of peace. So it is holding it all together. It's like anchoring every other rasa, the rasa of Shanta. So now we'll start really plunging into what the spirituality is, Indian spirituality. So before I plunged into Vedanta or the Vedas, I wanted to give a background of why we are even talking about the Vedas and Vedantas. Because they are the foundational work. And from all those mantras, what has become the most popular? Of these thousands and thousands of mantras, the most popular of all the mantras is this, the Gayatri Mantra of the Veda, that a lot of us know. So it's Om Bhur Bhuvaswa Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. So it's an invocation to this Lord Savitur, who is the supreme sun, which is also the illumination of the mind. A god who illumines the mind. We are invoking this god, and we are asking him to illumine our intellect. And before we invoke the Supreme God, there is a preamble to the invocation, and that is Bhur Bhuvaswa. So these are 3 realms that we invoke. And these are the 3 realms. Bhu is the earth. Bhuva is the middle world or the life world. And Swa is the mind world or high mind. And these exist in the individual. Like we have the earth with us, that's the body. And we have the life world, whatever we are alive because we have the life world. We have emotions, we interact with each other through our life plane. And then we have the mind, the thoughts, the emotion, the intellect, the intuitions, everything that we get through the mind. So these 3 worlds are invoked as the preamble or the invocation to the mantra. And this is existent in the microcosm, which is the body, and the macrocosm. So cosmos outside. It also has the earth plane, it has the life plane, it has the heaven plane or the illumined plane. And there are planes beyond. So in the real mantra, if you want to do the whole of it, they don't stop at Om Bhur Bhuva Swa. It goes Om Bhur Bhuva Swa Maha Jana Tapa Satya. So totally there are 7 realms, which is why 7 is such an important number in Indian philosophy, because it has those 7 realms. We have the 7 chakras, and the 7 times we go around fire for auspicious events like weddings. And in many places you have in the Vedas, they are talking about the 7 sisters. They are the 7 rivers. So they are these 7 consciousnesses that flow. So flow from heaven, that's why they are called rivers. So Sri Aurobindo has a variation on this Gayatri Mantra, and I'll read it. You'll see there's a slight difference. It's still to Savitur that we are praying. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet. I'll just quickly go back. So we see that one word that is the main difference, I would say, is Dhiyo yo na prachodayat. That is, let our intellect be illumined by the light of the sun. And the last line says, Yanna Satyena Deepayet. So he has invoked a word, Satyam, that doesn't exist in the old Gayatri Mantra of the Rig Veda. It's because he's talking, Satya is truth. So let truth illumine us. And it's truth because we are also getting into the Satya Yuga, the age of truth. So let that age come, take us by the hands, and we enter this realm of truth. Not just the realm of light that will illumine our dhiya. Dhiya means the intellect. It's illumine us fully. Yanna Satyena Deepayet means every realm of our being, whatever we are capable of. And there'll be several ranges we are capable of. Not just these 3, no? Om Bhur Bhuva Swa. All the rest that I said. The plane of the higher mind, the plane of Maha, Tapa, Jana. So there's the bliss world, the consciousness world, and the truth world. All these are also part. And the Maha is the supermind, the Vijnana, that which links the lower to the higher world. So here are some core teachings of the Vedanta. So Vedanta is the 3 texts. Of them, one of the whole series is called the Upanishads. And it means, Upanishad means sitting close to. So you sit close to what? To whom? It can be again interpreted in various ways, and all of them are at once you can interpret them. So you sit close to your guru. You sit close to your guru, or you sit close to the texts, the Upanishads themselves, or you sit close to your own inner self. So there are various ways you can sit close to. And the important thing is also sitting. So pausing, taking that a few deep breaths near to something you have to plunge into. Before you plunge into this ocean, you sit beside it and know it. It takes a lot of effort from within, and which is called Swadhyaya. No one can teach you the Vedanta. It's something that you have to experience. You can perhaps learn it with the mind, but it is finally your own experience. And when you are ready, a guru could bless you with that grace. If the guru wants or the divine wants, you will be illumined. But it is not something that you can learn in a classroom or in a lecture. You could perhaps get a few glimpses, but the hard work has to be done yourself. And some people will say it's not hard work, it's the fun part of living. To really plunge in this wonderful ocean of delight. So here are some of these little, we can say, the golden bubbles that float up from this ocean. Its concepts are tat. In English, it's translated as that, and it's the same cognate because, English and Indic languages, Sanskrit, are from the same parent language, which it's called Proto-Indo-European. Some people want to call it Proto-Indo-Iranian because Persian was one of the most ancient, it was an ancient language at the same time as Sanskrit. So they want to give it some importance more than just Latin and Greek. So it's whatever you want to call it. Basically, there was a mother language. That's why we share a lot of words with English. So tat and that is one of those words. And it is different from he or she. So as soon as it represents the supreme divine, the absolute, the infinite, something that you cannot define. As soon as you try to define it, you'll be limiting it. So in short, you just say that. And you don't want to say it also because it's a neutral gender. She and he are, of course, gendered. So you don't want to use any of them. So just use as that. So that is tat. And essence, the word for essence in Sanskrit is tattvam. So it's literally that, hood. Tvam means hood. So essence of everything is called tattvam because the tat is in everything. So one of the foundational beliefs or experiences of the rishis is that everything has the divine or that ultimate principle. That supreme principle exists in everything. Whether it's made of plastic, you can say it's completely man-made and tortured into this object, that too has the divine. And something that's really alive, like a human or a plant, that too has the divine. So the very first phrase of an Upanishad, Isha Upanishad, is Ishavasyam idam sarvam. The Lord, everything is the house of the Lord, or the Lord lives in everything. So that is a foundational belief, which is why the word tattvam or essence comes from tat. Now, Brahman is also that supreme, but we call it Brahman when we want to give it a personality. So when that supreme has a personality, it's not an abstract concept. It's person, it could have a name, it could have qualities, it can be the creator. So that concept is the Brahman. And what are the qualities of the Brahman? He has Sat, Chit, and Ananda. 3 important qualities. And of course, from them, the rest of the qualities are derived. So that's truth, consciousness, and bliss. Together, they are called Satchidananda with Sandhi, or the union of words. So Satchidananda is also another word that replaces Tat and Brahman. And when you use the word Satchidananda, you are conscious of the fact that this Brahman has qualities. It's not a qualityless or Nirguna Brahman. Nirguna means without qualities. So when you're very consciously trying to say that this Brahman full of qualities, then you want to use the word Satchidananda. When you want to say that this Brahman who is a personality, then you use the word Brahman. And when you want to say it as the most abstract, you don't want to nail it down as a person or quality full of, a person or thing full of qualities, you call it Tat. So the texts, the Vedanta use these words interchangeably depending on the context, what they want to convey. And some other qualities of this Brahman or Satchidananda are Dhruvam. Dhruvam means constant. With everything changing and ephemeral in the world, that which is constant is this. This doesn't change. And it is Nityam, means it's eternal. It's not subject to time. It never was born, it will never die, it always exists. So some people translate Sat as existence. It always existed. Truth and existence are the same. If it is true, it existed, and if it existed, it is true. So it's that existence with E capital, you can say, and truth with T capital. So now we are already getting into the realm where language fails us. And that too is called out in the Vedanta. So they say, yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. So it says that the rishis saying there is a place where words can't reach, and the words and the mind are both chasing this truth and they can't reach it, so they fall back. So I am talking of that where the mind and words don't reach. And if you can conceive of it, or if you can go there, then you know what I'm talking about. Until then, take it as a belief, take it as a non-belief, it doesn't matter. But there is such a place. So he states that also. So if you jump in and you say that all truths are described in the Vedanta, they say no, because Vedanta themselves say that no, we cannot exhaust all truth, because truth is something beyond words. It's beyond conception. It's what you are. In that moment, if you become the truth, then you feel everything as this unity, the unity experience, as they say. That comes when you have really experienced it, and words cannot take you that far. Now, Amritam is immortal. As if it is infinite, it's also immortal. It doesn't take birth in time. And this Mrit means death. It also means earth. Mritika. Mritika is earth, because everything on earth or in the material plane is subjected to death. So the material plane is not the eternal plane. And we can see from our own bodies. Every day cells fall off. In fact, you can hardly say that you have anything that belonged to you 10 years back. You're completely new. You're recycled. And your parts of your cells are in others. So if you see from that perspective, you're already united with so many others. So that's what they're trying to remind you, that it's Amritam, that Supreme is Amritam. At this point, they haven't yet talked about the individual soul. So now we are getting into the individual soul. So that Supreme God exists. Is he separate from this creation as he created and checked out? So now they're saying, Chetanash Chetananam. Among all the consciousnesses, he is the consciousness. So we are all the consciousnesses, but the ultimate consciousness is he, which means there is that supreme soul and we are all parts of it. We have that supreme soul, which is infinite, can infinitely subdivide itself. And each division of that supreme is also a whole. And that whole we have. So it says it's Eka Bahunam. It's that one amongst the many. That one soul amongst the many. Some people had asked, since I think it was one of Alexander's people who first came to India not too many years back, just 300 BC. So at that point, Indian spirituality and psychology, philosophies were very well developed already. So they heard that Indians could count the number of souls that exist on earth. So they had asked that since you have counted it, what is it? What is that number? They thought it's going to be in hundreds of millions. And said, yes, it's one. We have counted and that answer is just one. How is it all of you? I thought all of you have souls. Then if you just say one, that means you all have group soul, or you shared that soul, or there's just one amongst you who has the soul and the rest just have bodies. They said, no, now you have to know what infinity is. And if you can conceive what infinity is, you can also conceive of infinite divisions of the infinity. And each division being the whole. So now we get into a real realm of paradoxes. And they say, oh, you want to challenge your mind? Here's a shloka. Om Purnamada Purnamidam. You know this shloka, right? Purnat Purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. And it says, this is your mathematics of the infinite. If you can crack this riddle, then you would know why there is one soul. And it is that infinite soul. So, Eka Bahuna. Bahu is many, but one. There is one, and yet there is the many. And he is that one amongst the many. And then we come to the concept of the Dehin. So, Dehi is the body, and Dehin is the soul. So they say that supreme that we have described in the first line, Tat, Brahman, Sachidananda, he is the Dehin. So he exists within us. The divine with his infinite grace has planted a bit of him in all of us. Now I'm saying him, don't take it as him. It's just because language has its limitations. A bit of that is in each of us. And we are the full that. We are the Dehin. So we are not a body. We are a soul that has a body. and that it's soul's journey. And it passes through various planes of consciousness. We talked of the 7 planes of consciousness when we talked about that mantra. It passes through the 7 planes of consciousness. And it passes through the various states of being, which are the 4 states that are called out. But there are many states in between the states. So there could be a little bit of this and that. For example, the Indian classical music, there are not staccato notes like sa and re. Between sa and re, there are these infinite sounds, shrutis. So similarly, between one plane to the other, there are infinite planes. So it's a mathematics of infinite, it's a spirituality of infinite, and you really need that infinite kind of mind to understand it. And yet, the mind needs to classify, because otherwise the rational mind cannot function. So the philosophers have helped us classify things. So they said, okay, there are 7 planes of consciousness. You learn these 7 planes, they map to the 7 chakras. You do 7 this and that, okay. Now you have grasped the 7 planes. Now we'll tell you about the states of being. There are 4 states of beings. Because it is easy for the mind to understand. Otherwise, there are infinite states of being. Each of us is in a different state of being. So the 4 states that you can say exist separately or distinct states. One is the state of the Jagrat, when we are in the body, awakened, consciousness. And then the state when we are asleep. So that's the Swapna state. When you're asleep, you are traveling, but what body are you traveling in? You are getting all the experiences. You will feel pain. It is so deep, the experiences, that you cry in your sleep. And it's a make-believe world. Now the question is it a make-believe world, or it's just another world? That the gross body may think it's make-believe, but that body, the subtle body that's traveling in the dream realms, it doesn't think it's make-believe. It is very much active and alive in that realm. So they say it's a state of being, because you can be there at some point. And then there are deeper states of being. So the 3rd state of being is when you even transcend the dream state and you are in the state of deep sleep, as it is called, or samadhi. So you have connected with the supreme within. That little soul or the spark has connected with that infinite, and it's in a state of unity with that infinite. So that's a state of being. And then there are 4th. So what do you call the 4th? So here we have really no words to call the 4th. So we call it very creatively the 4th. And the word for that is Turiya. Chaturtha means 4. No? So cha is an prefix. So Turiya. Turiya means the 4th state. And it is so beyond explanation that you explain it with negations. So it is not that, it is not this, and it's not that. So you keep explaining it with negations. And when you have completely emptied it, your mind is empty of all biases, all what you had thought this to be. Now you are ready to understand what this 4th is. Then they will put affirmations. And these affirmations are so grand that it is the foundation of this whole creation. And they keep adding affirmations of what this 4th is. And all these 4 states are described aphoristically. That means in really short verses, packed with knowledge, in one Upanishad, which is the smallest of all Upanishads. It has only 12 shlokas. Everything about these 4 states of being are offered in this Upanishad. It's called the Mandukya Upanishad. And as you can imagine, there are thick books written on just the Mandukya Upanishad, talking of these 4 states of being. And these 4 states of being are connected with the Maha Mantra. The Maha Mantra is the easiest of all mantra. It's Om. This one sound. So they connect the 4 states as A, U, Ma, and the silence. The 4th is the silence. So when you chant Om, you're actually going through Om. Hold the silence again. Om. So it's not Om, it's Om. So you do that chant, and there are whole yogas. Like you can reach the divine, but with just this one chant, this mantra. It is so powerful. And how much can we explain about this mantra? there are lots of Upanishads that give you glimpses of this. Like I said, the Mandukya Upanishad attaches it to these 4 states of being. And it also explains why is attached to the Jagrat state or the conscious state, U is attached to the dream state, Ma is attached to the Samadhi, and the silence is attached to the 4th state. It explains all this, and after you read all this, it will still make no sense until you start doing this mantra and you see what resonates within. At some point, the whole being will start resonating with this mantra, Maha Mantra. And the beauty of it is it's so simple. You don't have to know Sanskrit. You don't have to know any language. It's just one sound. And anyone can try it out. And the next concept is about knowledge. So this is where we develop the epistemology of the Vedanta, as in the question of how do we know what we know. We ask this question, and this is a student goes up. This is there in Mundaka Upanishad, one of course, the major Upanishads. These are all part of the major Upanishad. Not Mandukya, this is Mundaka. So the very first, this is the 3rd verse of the very first section. The student himself is a very knowledgeable rishi. He goes close to a guru, his guru, who is even more knowledgeable. And he asks the guru, is there a knowledge by which everything else can be known? So think of the audacity to even conceive of some knowledge that by which everything else can be known. It's like the master key that opens all the doors. The guru can very well say, there is no such knowledge. If you want to learn maths, you have to go to maths class. If you want to learn Sanskrit, you have to go to Sanskrit class. There is no one thing that you will know and by which you can derive maths and derive Sanskrit and derive philosophy, derive ecology. There is no such one thing. He could have said. On the contrary, he said, yes, you're right, there is such a knowledge. So of course, student wants to know what is that knowledge. So he says it's the knowledge of the Supreme. And he says there are 2 kinds of knowledge systems. One is the lower knowledge. It's called the apara vidya. Vidya is knowledge. So apara, not para. And para is the knowledge of the beyond. So he says there are 2 knowledges. One is worldly knowledge. So all that you learn in your school is only apara vidya, the lower knowledge. So when are we ready for the higher knowledge? So this higher knowledge is what you have to listen, you have to internalize with the mind, and you have to meditate on. So the 3 principles of knowledge or knowing the higher knowledge are Shravana, Manana, Nidhidhyasana. Shravana is listening. So you listen to the guru or you listen to these works that are works of deep philosophy or deep spirituality. And then manana. Manana is like the mantra, no? The root word for mantra and manana are the same. So you let it resonate in your mind. Mana is the word for mind. So you keep chanting it or you engage with it. You sit beside it. This is where the Upanishad comes, sitting beside. You sit beside this mantra, you let it resonate in your mind, and then sit quiet. The Nidhidhyasana is the meditation. You cannot just use words and chanting and japa and the movements of the mind to apprehend something that's beyond the mind. So you plant it well in the mind and then go beyond. So this is the Nidhidhyasana. So this is what the epistemology is, that there is this lower knowledge, there is this higher knowledge. The higher knowledge is the master key. Once you know it, you can derive all this thing about the world. And this Upanishad gives the master key. He talks about this higher knowledge of what the Supreme is. Again, it can never be exhausted. So the Upanishad is a very big Upanishad. It has very beautiful shlokas. And there are shlokas we have taken, the Indian government or Indian polity has taken and made it its mantras. For example, the Ashok Stambha that we see, the 4 lions, it has become the emblem of the Republic of India. We took it on January 26, 1950. We made it our symbol. Below that is Satyameva Jayate. Truth alone triumphs. So this saying is from this Upanishad. So part of the higher knowledge is this, know that only truth triumphs. And we took this, this little phrase from a whole shloka, the first two words, Satyameva Jayate, and we made it the motto. So again and again, modern India, in whichever field you can see, has gone back to these texts, either the Gita or the Vedanta, and they have taken these phrases and they have implanted them in different organizations, in different emblems to remind us in various ways that this is our core value, core teaching, and this is what will keep us alive. As you know that the Mother and Aurobindo and a lot of luminaries have talked about every nation having a tattva, or the essence that it wants to work out, a quality of the divine that it wants to work out. And the quality that India is working out is the quality of spirituality. So that is her offering to the world. So when people say, will India ever be a superpower, like a great nuclear power, great warrior nation? The answer is no. Because our rishis have said that India's experiment is not in the field of bravery, virya. It's in the field of spirituality. Will India ever become the guru of the world as a spiritual guru? And the answer is yes, she should strive for it, because this has been told by the rishis of ancient times and the modern rishis that this is her core capacity. Her raison d'etre or her essence is spirituality. So she should try to work it out. And that's why we have these reminders sprinkled all over our polity, our emblems. A lot of institutions start with chants. Classical music is full of Sanskrit chants and devotional chants. Everything that reminds us that we are a nation of spiritual values. And however much we try to develop industrialization or the material world, we'll still fall short of nations like America that were chosen for material experimentation. They will always be the leaders in the world, in the field of matter. But each nation has a place to play in this harmonious creation. And this is India's contribution. So Paravidya and Aparavidya are the true knowledge systems. They're also told in different words. One is Vidya, that's higher knowledge, and Avidya, opposite of higher knowledge. It's also the word for ignorance. So this field of lower knowledge is also the field of ignorance. As long as you don't know that higher knowledge, you are in the field of ignorance. And what this higher knowledge is Madhu Vidya. It's the honey of, Madhu means honey. So the knowledge is honeyed knowledge. It's the knowledge of the Supreme is also the knowledge of its sweetness. So there is a lot of sweetness in knowing the divine. So it could be a path of a lot of effort, but it's not an arduous path, as in a very dry path that is bereft of love, bereft of the rasa of the Supreme. So they say raso vaisa, he is full of rasa, he is full of taste and essence and color. And this path to the divine, the path of knowledge, is Madhu Vidya, because it is sprinkled with honey. And then the last concept that I have in this, of course, it doesn't exhaust all the concepts, is the grace. So the concept of whoever is chosen by the divine, only he gets the knowledge or gets the illumination. You have to put the individual effort, which is very important. Without individual effort, the grace will not come. But even with a lot of individual effort, if there is no grace, if the divine hasn't chosen you or hasn't looked at you to give you the experience will not come. So this grace keeps the seeker always humble that there is always someone above who's giving this knowledge, who's gracing the person with knowledge, however hard or however much he has debated, he has perfected all the instruments, his mind, he has reached all the levels of higher mind and illumined mind and intuitive mind and everything, he is ready. But still he hasn't had the experience because the grace hasn't come down on him or hasn't blessed him. So these are some of the concepts of the Vedanta. This is the twofold knowledge. A little deeper into these twofold knowledges, and one of the you can say one of the humorous points of the Vedanta are, he says that those who dwell in the darkness or in the ignorance, but they think they know a lot, are fools who go round and round. And there are fools who lead the fools, like the blind leading the blind. It's an idiom that's used, andhenaiva niyamana yathanda. So a person who knows a lot actually knows very little. There is a saying by Confucius. He's around the time of Buddha in China. He was a great philosopher. So he talks about the knowledge systems. And there he says, one who knows not that he knows not is a child, teach him. One who knows not that he knows is asleep, awaken him. And one who knows that he knows not is wise, teach him. And one who knows that he knows is a master, follow him. So this one is talking about those who don't even know that they don't know, the first level. And they're teaching each other, but it's like the blind leading the blind. So it's a warning sign for being in the field of ignorance. As soon as you think you know a lot, oh, that's a problem. That's where the warning bells should ring. That maybe you're being led by the blind, or you are leading the blind and yourself are blind. So there's a little more about the ignorance and the realm of the lower knowledge, where if you follow after ignorance, of course, you are in the ignorance, in the darkness. But if you focus on one knowledge or one aspect or one system alone, if you think your religion is the best or your lifestyle is the best, then you're in a greater darkness. So it's warning people of too much focus. As the saying goes, specialization is knowing more and more about less and less until you know nothing about everything. No, until you know everything about nothing. So finally, what do you know? You know everything about nothing, so you don't know anything. So it's trying to warn us against specialization and the pride of knowing a lot, but still in one field. This is the question that we started with. The student is asking, by knowing what, O revered one, is all else known? And this is the answer. Angiras is the guru, that there are twofold. Twofold is the knowledge that must be known, of which the knowers of the Brahman tell, the higher and lower knowledge. And he says here, the lower knowledge are the Vedas. All the rituals that you learn in the Vedas, they are actually lower knowledge. And all the systems, Vedangas, are the different subjects that they studied at that age to learn the Vedas. In the modern age, they translate to all the subjects we study in school. So they are all lower knowledge. The higher knowledge is by which the immutable is known. So everything else is the lower knowledge, and the rest is, if you know the immutable, is the higher knowledge. So there was, in one of the Upanishads, there is a great yogi or great rishi called Yajnavalkya. He's written a lot of hymns of one of the Upanishads, Brihadaranyaka, one of the biggest of Upanishads. He had a very Vidushi wife, or a wife who was a spiritual person herself. Maitreyi, her name was. She's, again, one of those luminaries in Indian spirituality. Maitreyi and Yajnavalkya. So they have a conversation on truth, which is in this Upanishad. So the beginning of the conversation is that Yajnavalkya is leaving his household and going off to the forest because he wants to concentrate on his inner growth and not think about earning money and the upkeep of his ashramas, students, wives, etc. So when he's leaving Maitreyi, he's saying that I have earned a lot of money for you, I have left it for you, be happy, I'm leaving. So Maitreyi asks that all this wealth that you're giving me, worldly wealth, will it take me to the immortal? He says, no, but it'll keep you happy in this life. And she says, then why do I need it? So her thing is, ye naham namritasyam kimaham tena kuryam. That by which I will not reach the immortal, what should I do with it? So I don't need all this. So she sweeps them all away and she says, rather take me with you. I be a follower and teach me what you are going to learn in this forest. And he takes her along with him and he teaches her. And it's a very big thing, as you can see. The Vedanta is not something we can do in 1.5 hours. But I will leave you with something very sweet. It's part of Yajnavalkya and Maitreya's conversation. And this is about love. So they are husband and wife. So Maitreya asks that, is there something called human love? We can always ask if you're talking of the divine and he's so grand, maybe there's just a divine love and there is nothing like human love. We should perhaps not even indulge in it. So Yajnavalkya says, in a beautiful passage that has a lot of refrain because it has similar kind of words. It has a mantric power. He says, my dear, you don't love the husband for the sake of the husband, but you love the husband for the sake of the self. So you don't love the child for the sake of the child. You love the child for the sake of the self. He goes on, you don't love wealth for the sake of wealth. You love the wealth for the sake of the self. You don't love nature for the sake of nature, but for the sake of the self. You don't love Brahman for the sake of Brahman, for the sake of the self. You don't love everything for their sakes, but you love for the sake of the self. So now what is the self that for which you love everything else? So this is where the word Atman is used. For the sake of the Atman you do. And now we are coming to a very core concept of the Vedanta, that is the Atman. So what is this Atman? So the Atman is the self, translated in English, but sometimes it's the lower self, so it is with S, small s, and if it is the higher self, it's the capital S. So now, since we know that we are a spark of the divine, so we are, when we talk of us being spark of the divine, we are that higher self. So we are Atman with S capital. And when we are the lower self, that is the ego self, we are still the Atman. It's the same word with S lowercase. So when he says for the sake of the self, we love our lover, which means that either we love the lover for the ego, for the sake of the ego, because we want love back. That's why we love. Or because we are that supreme self, the Atman, the supreme soul, that we love everything else because we do not see a difference between us and them. There is no difference, so we are always in love with ourselves, which means we are always in love with everything else. So Raman Maharshi, who's very close to Pondicherry, he was at the same time as Sri Aurobindo. He was a great rishi, of course. And he developed the concept of the Atman that's around us, the universal Atman. And someone asked him that, they used to ask him worldly questions also, like all gurus are asked, worldly questions. So the question was, how do we behave with others? So his answer was, there is no other. The question itself is not valid because there is no other. I have become identified with all this. So there is a shloka that in the Upanishad, in the Katha Upanishad, which says that Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmai va bhut vijanata tatra ko moha ka shoka ekatvam anupashyata. That means if there is a person who is identified with everything, so much so that he sees everything within himself, like he is not just that small individual, he has become this cosmic being. He has become the transcendental being. And at the same time, he is the individual being. So that being, where does he have any delusion? Or where does he have this sense of us and them? This fear of the other? He doesn't have shoka, he doesn't have moha, he's not deluded. One who sees this unity everywhere. So Yajnavalkya is talking of human love and raising it to the love for the divine, and he's saying there's no real difference. So if you can love the divine so wholeheartedly that you have identified with this Atman, which is the universal Atman, the transcendental Atman, and the individual Atman, from that stance, if you love anything, you will be in unconditional love. You will love them unconditionally and love them wholeheartedly. And this is what love, true love is. So at this point, I'll stop at this note of this Madhu Vidya. Now we know why it is honey knowledge, because it talks of love, and which is why the Bhakti movement has so many saints in India and such a big path. The Bhakti Marga is, or the path of the yoga of Bhakti is so grand, so huge, and it connects with people so deeply. I'll leave it at this. And if there are any discussion points, anything, yes. If there's no mic, I'll pass this around. We'll just pass this around. Anybody has questions? Yes? Oh, there are two persons. Yeah, it's working.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, what is the difference between Brahman and Atman? Because I have read that Brahman is what is present within us, and Atman is also is both are the same terms, or
yes,
is there any difference?
It is like I'll tell you 4 terms that we have within. Okay, we have the Jivatman, we have the Chaitya Purusha, we have the Antaryamin, and we have the Atman. So just to make a question a little more complicated, it's a very complex question. So that transcendental Brahman, the personal divine, which we call the Brahman transcendental, is also the impersonal Tat, and it also is the Atman, that super soul, that infinite soul. And since it has infinitely subdivided in each of us, we are also the Atman. We are that supreme soul, but we are also the individual Atman. And also the cosmic being, there is something called the cosmic being, that too is the Atman. So that's why there are so many hair-splitting discussions that happen. But if you have reached the space of knowledge, there is no real contradiction or no real debate when you know that this Atman is that Atman. It's a threefold personality. So since we are working on Sri Aurobindo, and there will be more talks on Sri Aurobindo, so Sri Aurobindo has developed this idea that you are asking of how many types of personalities do we have in the Life Divine and Synthesis of Yoga. So there are 2 of his books. The Synthesis of Yoga is the yoga. He tells you about how to practice his philosophy, and the Life Divine is his philosophy. So you will find these concepts in both the books. One will perhaps teach you a little practical ways of reaching the divine, and the other will give you more abstractions or more knowledge. It will ground you in the knowledge of what the divine is. And all these different kinds of inner beings exist at the same time. Just a little story, since we talked about the Antaryamin. Antaryamin is the person who lives within. So there was the story of, you know how Draupadi in the Mahabharata, the lowest point of Draupadi and perhaps the Mahabharata is when she is dragged to the court and she's disrobed. And when she's being disrobed, her 5 husbands are unable to help her because they have been enslaved. So she's calling the Supreme, she's calling Krishna, who has incarnated as the person Krishna at that point. And Draupadi knows that he is actually everywhere. He's the cosmic being. So he will listen to her call. So she's calling him Gopal, please come help me. Achyuta, these are all names of Krishna. Achyuta, come help me. Govardhan Dhari, please help me. Different names, Devaki Nandana. And he's not coming. And then she says, Antaryamin, please help me. And immediately he shows up. So then when the whole episode is over, Draupadi asked that, I was calling you so desperately with so many names, why didn't you come? Then he says, okay, when you called me Gopal, I had to dress up like the Gopal, that's the cowherd. So I had to wear golden dhoti, I had to have a peacock feather, I had to take my flute. So it took me so much time, so I couldn't come. By then you called me Govardhan Dhari. So now I have to run after this mountain and come with that mountain in my finger. So before I came, you called me Devaki Nandana. So now I had to be the son of Devaki and dress up this way. So it took me so long. But when you said Antaryamin, I was right there. So I'm always with you. And when you remembered that, I just materialized. And so the whole story tells us that there are so many ways we can describe the Lord: outside, inside, universal, transcendental, but He is within. That too is... so the Antaryamin is a very powerful concept.
Firstly, nice. It was a very educational thing. But my question is towards the psychological counselor in you. And that is, so when someone approaches with these concepts in practice, and it is not received in the same way in the other, doesn't that actually create a friction in the person practicing? And thereby, won't there be a psychological rupture itself? And that affects the self. My question to you is, what are the methods that I'm using me? Because at some point, at some place in my life, I've tried to reciprocate with certain actions, and it was met with more of disrespect and etc., etc. All the negative terms. Give whatever you want. So my question is, what are the methods that could be used to overcome these things? I mean, I could think all these abstract things, oh, Antaryami or whatever, sorry about it. But ultimately, in the world that we live in, these are all great concepts to live by, but none of us do. So what could be the other form or the method to use, when such happens? I mean, was I clear, or should I?
I will repeat the question.
That's to the psychological counselor.
Yes. Let me repeat the question.
I go to my psychiatrist every day.
And if it needs correction, please do so. So your question was that when I am meeting someone, at what level am I meeting them? Yes. As let's say I know the Vedanta or respect the Vedanta, but they are not. They are from, let's say, other spiritual paths. Where do I meet them? At what point? So, especially if you ask about psychological counseling, there is a whole course or a subtopic to study. It's called cultural sensitivity. So you study what different cultures, all the world cultures in the world, and you also study to be sensitive to where they come from. So their journeys are different from your journey. And we know there are infinite journeys. So my journey is not the only journey that I can impose on this person. So you try to align yourself to this person's journey and give the best you can. And also, if you cannot meet them at where they are, then you say, I am not the right fit. For example, I'll tell you that the Dharma traditions are very well grounded in the concept of a soul's journey, and that the fact that the soul's journey needs multiple lives. In other words, the concept of reincarnation is it's central to spiritual counseling. How do you counsel a person who doesn't believe in reincarnation? Let's take an example of that. So it is difficult to you speak about reincarnation and make them get out of, let's say, the anxiety of living just one life and having to go through this judgmental process where they live forever in heaven or hell. You try to bring them, you give them this worldview of yours. If it works, fine. If it doesn't work, please tell them you're not the right fit. There are so many others who are from their monotheism or in their worldview who can talk to them, who have found a solution within their context. Because it's difficult for people from the Vedanta context to align themselves with people who do not believe in this being such a core value. And it's one of these axioms. Once you believe in this axiom, you can develop your theory of the soul's journey, of life, of spirituality, of getting rid of anxiety. And if this doesn't exist, people like me, I cannot give them advice or counsel on what to do. Then I will tell them, see, I've tried to show you my worldview. If you could grasp anything from it, or if you can find anything that helps you, well and good. But I cannot explain from your perspective, so I'm not the right fit. You have a follow-on, I can see he has a follow-up question.
I mean, this is more going on to cultural ideologies, but stripping it off the ideology itself, but talking in the essence of love, is that, you know, when we all speak of these unconditional methods of love, that you are me, I am you, these amazing philosophies, I will call them philosophies at this point, because when you meet the person at that form of consciousness or that form of stream of being, I seem to understand that it's not taken that way. It is abused. So once that abuse of love happens, like I have a cell phone, I start abusing the cell phone, I throw it, I do all that. Why would I buy one more? So wouldn't that close the being psychologically? So my question to you is on that aspect. I'm not speaking culturally, I'm not speaking geographically, I'm speaking from the point of love.
Yeah, so like the mother says, there are 4 stages of love. The first stage is when you love someone else because they are loving you back. The second stage, you love them even if they don't love you back. And then at the last stage, you love them because they are the divine. So it doesn't matter if they know it or not, or if they are behaving as such or not. You can still love them, and you don't have to show it. You don't need to show your love, because when you try to show the love, it's coming back with some sort of abuse, because they're not being able to meet you where you are. So it's okay not to show it, but from your own perspective, you don't have to close the doors. It may be a much harder world to live in, where you're living alone and you're practicing love, but there's no real person to shower your love on, or to even see that your love is working out, someone is appreciating it. It's difficult, but it is a possibility, and they in fact say that that's the highest form of loving. Loving unconditionally without waiting for someone to return the love, and not even showing that you love them unconditionally.
So this association that we have with land and this feminine aspect that you give to her, when I was reading the initial script in the book, like her mother or as India as her, like what is this fascination with land association with as her? I mean, is it because it's a provider types, or so
it's because of the fertility. We call the Urvara Desha. Urvara means fertile. Okay. Yeah, that's like a woman who can bear.
Could you tell me also on the aspect of when was the 9th rasa added? At what time period was this 9th rasa?
I will tell you, it's not part of this discussion. So very short, in a short way. We are having more conversations on Indian culture, so maybe we'll develop it later. But in short, Bharat Muni codified the rasas, and there were 8 rasas at that time. But Abhinava Gupta is a Kashmiri Pandit, or not Pandit, a scholar, a great rishi. So he added the 9th rasa, the Shanta rasa, which is the background rasa. So it came much later, Abhinava Gupta. We don't know the times of Bharat Muni also, but we have given him 1,000 year, like from 500 BCE to 500 CE. Sometime it was codified. Abhinava Gupta is also still not very well known when, but it's later. That much we know, because we have texts that talk about just the 8 rasas. And then the 9th has come, and it has become the foundational rasa. And that's not all. When Buddhism came to India, of course, these are also dharma traditions. Why didn't I mention Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, right? Someone may ask. It's because from the perspective of Vedanta, it's not very different. These are just different flavors. It's like, why did I not talk of Shaivism and Vaishnavism? It's just different focuses on the same Vedanta concept. So Buddhism and Jainism focused on ahimsa, and they developed that concept. And Sikhism focused on union, unity, seva. So different. So we don't even consider, like we, as in I'm identifying myself as the Vedanta tradition, we don't consider these different religious paths as different from the dharma traditions, which we don't call Hinduism. We want to call it Sanatana Dharma, the eternal dharma, because of problematic areas which we talked in my first talk, so I will not repeat. So that's where we are, that it's a different focus. That's why.
So you started your session with Veda Upanishad, then you did put the Gita, but the Vedanta is, the Upanishad is part of Vedanta. And in the Vedanta you put also Bhagavad Gita, but Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata, which comes very much later. That is one thing, and I mean, I understand why you did also, because it's a different level of text. But just because of that different level, when you were speaking and I was thinking about the book of Sri Aurobindo, The Human Cycle, when he's explaining the different intuition, so which will be the Veda and Upanishads, and then the typal rational, all that, and I was making parallel. And that's, so it's just not more than a question. It's also, can we consider this also according to this human evolution? I mean, not evolution in terms of evolution like that, but the evolution like that.
Okay, so if I get you right, you're talking of the 4 ages or 4 cycles
Yes.
that Sri Aurobindo talked about in the human cycle, the symbolic, typal,
Yeah.
conventional, and subjective.
Correspond to this writing.
And you want to map it to the evolution of spirituality in India. Okay, very good question. So let me take the Bhagavad Gita question first. So here's something that people really don't know when the Gita was written. And they say it was a separate text on its own that got incorporated in the Mahabharata. Again, we don't know when the Mahabharata was written. So it's probably a later text than the Gita. In fact, we are pretty sure that is the later text, but we don't have dates for any of this. And as we know, the Mahabharata was a collection of a lot of contributors. So when the person whom we know as Vedavyas collected the Mahabharata and put it all together, he chose the Gita, and it fit in really well in this story, because it's the song of the Lord. And here's Arjuna as the divine, that's the human instrument, who could very well be the recipient of the song of the Lord. So it fit in well, but we don't really know. So when we talk of Vedanta, we don't talk of the Mahabharata. In fact, there are 2 splits we do of Indian spirituality, and those are Shruti and Smriti. So Shruti is things that are revealed, that are heard. So of the Shrutis are the Vedas, the 4 Vedas, the Vedanta, all the texts of the Vedanta. And Smriti is things that are from the mind, from memory. So it's a mental construct, a rational construct. So the rest of the texts are all Smritis. Now, the Smritis, do they have core values? Yes, they do talk of core values. They are based on the Vedanta. So this is not just stories and not valueless. There's a lot of value. In fact, giving value to the Smriti of Mahabharata is actually coming from the Gita, that you take a Shruti and you fit in seamlessly into the Mahabharata. It's there so well put into the Mahabharata that you have wedded the Smriti and Shruti, and you have at the same time said that the Smritis are not just storytelling for children, child minds. It is for very sophisticated minds also. That it's just a way that the mind can understand. It needs stories, it needs metaphors, it needs images. So we have the Smritis. But here, look at this text that's so well put into the Smriti. I didn't even answer your question of the 4 ages. Okay, we will do next time, yes. Yes, just in short, the symbolic age was the age of the Gita, the age of the Vedas, because they use symbolism. And then the Vedanta don't even follow in the typal age. So they are in between the age of symbolism and the typal age. Typal age already there is a fall. We are making rituals of the Vedas. So did you notice, actually we are looking at that very shloka, where it says that the lower knowledge is the Vedas. So by the time this Upanishad is being written, the typal age has already set in. So we have made rituals out of the Vedas and forgotten the symbolisms behind it. So that's why this Upanishad and the Gita also talks about the Veda in a poor light. But it's not the original Veda of the hymns, it's the Veda that has become in the typal age. So we could say that these texts are showing up in the typal age, but they are not typical of the typal age. They're still holding on to the core values. And from Tapal age, it became the conventional age. And then right now we are just getting into the subjective age, where we go back to the ancient texts and we get back again the rasa of the ancient text, and we try to incorporate them in our physical world. All these wonderful things, which is why we are trying to establish a renaissance in India.
The beauty of what you expressed in these three sessions is the fact that we feel so much at ease because we are, you are speaking about a sort of a universal knowledge, and it speaks to everybody, everywhere. Even nation is not attached to it. So with this as a base of the Indian philosophy, and it was so rich and so beautiful and so profound, that actually those who invaded India, Islam or the colonialism, the Christians, I always felt that those who came from outside and who are now all Indians, they have all of them a sort of Indian flavor. They have become actually Indians. There is some sort of unity, even if they have a different religion, for example, but there is an Indianness. So what was the philosophy before, where you can absorb, those who are coming from outside and you welcome them, and the tendency of today to make a division. You know that today we say that the others are different than us. You understand what I mean? Can you explain a little bit? Because here I have a sort of question.
It's a very loaded question. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so it's my personal take, and from what I have read from my culture studies and spirituality and all, I'm going to give you my personal take in this. It's that people may have come from outside. We Indians, we have come from Africa, as we know that all humanity has come from Africa so many million years ago. So we are not, nobody is indigenous to any country. So when you say come from outside, is itself not such a legitimate complaint. Yes, we have all come from outside, and why not? We have come, we have found a home in this place, and we have created something together, and there's no outsider, there's no boundary wall. I'm very sorry that countries have barbed wires, that they have visa processes. I would love it to be just one world. And this knowledge that we try to, this hoarding of Indian spirituality is the antithesis of what the spirituality is trying to tell you. It is, at the very base of it, is to share. And in particular, if we talk about Islam, I know there are people who say that they are still outsiders, that culture is different from Indian culture, but we wouldn't have something called Hindustani classical music, as rich as it is, without the influence of Islam. The Bhakti movement, that is such a strong movement, the movement of heart, wouldn't be as it is without the influence of Sufism. So the people who have come to India, there are a lot of scholars who say it's not a conquest. We do not call the Islamic arrival of people as conquest, because they have come much before the conquerors came. There was a rich trade between India and the Middle East. In fact, the Middle East straddled the two worlds, the West and India, and they created such a lot of, it's not just trade, it is exchange of ideas, exchange of philosophies. There was such a lot of richness because of the Silk Road. So when did the Muslims come? Not with Muhammad of Ghazni. They came hundreds of years before, and they learned from the Indian mathematicians. The Indians learned from their doctors. So we have been cross-pollinating each other for centuries. Alexander may have been the first Westerner that came, but Islam has been coming to us, and before Islam, Zoroastrians have come, the Romans have come, the Greeks had come. So this whole concept of migration, cultural appropriation, not giving enough credence to the mother culture, and it just belongs to India, I wouldn't believe in it at all. And especially in the context in which we speak of India being the spiritual guru of the world, how can you hoard it? And when you talk of India also, there are Indians in so many countries in the world. In Africa, there are so many Indians. In the West, there are so many Indians. So are they Indians? Are they not like centers of ripples? They are also creating ripples. They are pollinating the people they live with. So this thing is happening around the world, and it's been happening from the time of Silk Road. There are Hindus in Afghanistan. One would think, why are they still in Afghanistan? Because that's where they have lived for generations. That is home for them. And in their little way, they practice Hinduism, and they practice it alongside the Taliban. So that too exists. There's so much pluralism in the world that I refuse to see the few people who talk of division and who want to go back and get justice for those who have perhaps come and broken temples or erected mosques over temples. Because if you look at human history, there have been layers. The temples themselves were erected on Buddhist stupas. Ashoka had made 84,000 stupas around India. Where are those stupas? We just know 10 or something. Some big ones like Sanchi, Sarnath. 84,000 stupas. Of course, there are temples standing on the stupas. Are you going to go back? Will the Buddhists go back and ask for justice? And beyond the Buddhists also, there was something else before and something else before. Perhaps there was an ashrama of Rishi Agastya where we are sitting. Will they say, okay, uproot Aurobindo, get back Rishi Agastya's ashrama? It's how humanity survives, and this is how humanity progresses. This is civilization. And if you ask of contributions of Islam, most of the Indian beautiful structures you see are Indo-Persian or Indo-Islamic structures. The temples that we say, the dome structure of the temples have so much influence from Islam. Of course, things like Taj Mahal have influence. There isn't anything that you can tease apart. The language we speak, Hindi. Hindi is not Sanskrit. It is Persian, Turkish, Arabic, and Sanskrit. So 4 different languages put together is Hindi. So it's really a very narrow-minded outlook to say it's them and us, and they have come. And I would love to call Dominique an Indian, because at heart she is an Indian. Yeah, she may have been born in France. And what did the mother say? That she was so happy when India accepted her, because the soul doesn't belong to a nation. It's much higher. The concept of the soul is so much higher than what a nation is.
If I understood it right, Atman and Brahman is essentially the same, but in different personalities. I think so. And I'm also trying to understand what exactly you mean when you say divine, because I don't think I understood that. But I think my question more is in the sense of, you spoke about grace of the divine for you to bring out the best in you or in your Atman. I'm not sure if I'm muddling the concepts, forgive me. So I just wanted to understand what exactly is this divine grace, and who is this showering something upon you, or is it something that you bring it within yourself, and is it something in your control? So that's kind of my question.
Yeah, so regarding divine grace, it's from a shloka of the Upanishad. It says that this Atman cannot be analyzed through the mind or through debates or through a lot of reading. This is the shloka in English, or through a lot of reading. But the person who is chosen by the divine has it revealed to him. So the divine reveals it. So you can, it's another way of saying that you can't force the divine's hand. You can just force your hand. You can come as close as you can to the divine, but you can't ask the divine for revelation. That's up to the divine to give it to you. What is the divine? She's asking, what is the divine?
Basis of yoga, or the Aurobindo, little books about, there he explains, when you say God, you know?
Yes, yeah.
So, to answer this, like
Because you are
as she
the
said,
divine. Okay, she wants to get her own grace. Yes.
the divine grace is there, but in order for it to enter in you, it requires your receptivity. And the receptivity is the purification of the being. If the receptivity is not there, even if the divine wants, she cannot bless you or go inside. That space is required, and to create the space, that's your job. That's what we call sadhana. And the more space we create, the grace automatically flows in.
I mean, Lopa, you can clarify that, where they say that you too are the divine, but it's the divine who manifests in your form, for example, and forgets the source. He's so caught in the play of this manifestation that it's like that's what is called an illusion. It's because the source is forgotten. He himself gets caught, or he or whatever get caught in its own game. And when the recognition happens, then, that's why you are the divine. When they say you are the divine, it is him. There's nothing which exists outside. But the divine himself gets caught. But please correct me.
Actually, that is a very important concept that she has just said, Arunima, right? It's the concept of Maya. The Maya is the veil. So you are the divine, but you don't remember that you are the divine. Because there is that veil that has come, the forgetting that has happened. And there is a very potent shloka in the Isha Upanishad where it says, Om Krito Smara. So, O will remember what was done, remember what was done. So he says that you are the willpower, so you remember what was done. That means what is done, it's that fall that was done. So remember that fall. Awaken, remember that fall.
And there is a very beautiful example taken by a spiritual teacher where he says that the thing of King Lear, John Smith, the actor John Smith, who plays King Lear. Okay, John Smith knows that he is playing King Lear, but King Lear on stage doesn't know who is John Smith. He is King Lear. He doesn't know, or he doesn't remember that it is actually John Smith playing King Lear. So maybe.
Yeah. Yes, she has a question.
Okay. Of grace. The notion of grace, for me, grace is always there. We put a veil in between us and the veil, but we are under the grace that we make an effort or not. If we make an effort, we remove the veil between ourselves and the grace. But otherwise, it would not be grace if it were asking from us. It's my perception only.
The grace is always there.
It's a positive way, because as our friend is asking what grace is, if we say, well, grace is, you have to make an effort to receive grace. You don't want, grace is grace after all.
I just want to add, grace is already, we are living on this earth, breathing, that is already a grace. That in spite of COVID, we are still here on this earth. You see? Yes. And every moment is a grace. Otherwise, the life will be so different. There are countries where there are wars and all that. We are so happy to be here, and that's grace, divine grace. Thank you very much. Lopa, as always, it is so beautifully, so simply, she is explaining the depth of Indian culture. That's what is so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.